The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss is one of my most treasured books. Rothfuss is an American fantasy writer whose work has won several awards, including the 2007 Quill Award and the Alex Award in 2008 for the first novel in the series from which this book emerged. Published in London by Orion in 2014, this is the author's third book pertaining to the Kingkiller Chronicles trilogy, of which the third and final book has yet to be published. I have read this book 4 times since I bought it at Heathrow Airport in early 2018, and every time I read it, I sink into the story like a favourite comfy chair, and I always find there is something I've missed in the previous reads. At just 159 pages, it falls firmly into the category of novella, yet this story contains more mystery and whimsical adventure than many of the current popular fantasy heavy hitters. The plot, if you can call it that, takes place in a very specific period of time that relates to chapters 7 to 11 of The Wise Man's Fear, which is the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. It follows the 7 days of preparation that Ori, a character with a completely mysterious past, undertakes in preparation for the upcoming visit of the series' main character, Kvothe. She is searching for a suitable gift comprised of 3 things to present to him on his arrival. Somehow she wakes up on the first day and just knows instinctively that he will come in 1 week's time. She is very determined to stick to the proper way of things, and this is reflected over and over as the story progresses. If you possess any insight into what it is like living with mental illness, you may be able to connect to this character. She has at least one that is fairly easy to recognise, and that is a moderately severe case of obsessive-compulsive disorder. In my opinion, she also has some form of anxiety disorder as well, but the way that it is written, it's never brought to attention in any way. As a protagonist, she is strange and at times difficult for some people to relate to. My partner's tried reading the book, but wasn't able to finish it. For me, however, she is one of the most intriguing, yet lovely, relatable characters I have ever read about. She swings back and forth like a pendulum between prim and proper reserve and carefree and childlike enthusiasm. Her view of the world is so completely different and fresh that I could not help but fall in love with her, and her ability to provide personalities to the mundane items in her world. The way she names the areas of the place she lives, which she calls the underthing, are charming. The way she names the objects around her is rousing, and it brings life to her environment in a way that I have never experienced before. The supporting character is an alchemical lantern. From the very start of the story is not only named Foxen, but undergoes character development as if he is a companion and not an inanimate object of everyday use. It makes for uniquely enjoyable reading. One part of the text that I find particularly intriguing is that the writer includes what is essentially a disclaimer. In the very first sentence of the foreword, he warns readers that they may not want to buy the book. He goes on to advise them that this story is different from any usual story. The author takes the character of Ori and creates a bittersweet tale that gives readers a peek into her life beneath the magic university, as she goes about her days in a forgotten labyrinth of tunnels, ancient passageways, and abandoned rooms that comprise what she refers to as the Underthing. It is heartwarming, poignant, haunting, and joyful in turns, as the writer delights the reader with the way this forgotten girl views the world, and her thoughts and feelings about her life and her surroundings. It is not a normal book, as the writer says himself in the foreword. It doesn't do a lot of the things a classic story is supposed to do. It doesn't technically have a middle, a beginning, or an end to the story. It doesn't come to some big climax, but I still found that the conclusion was satisfying. In parts, the prose is beautifully poetic, and although the character could be doing the most mundane task, it is written as though she is creating or achieving something amazing and incredible. In the grand scheme of things, this is a small-scale story that is not telling us a fantastical high fantasy tale, yet nothing is lost in its telling in spite of that. The second and perhaps most important thing for me is the words that the writer uses. As an avid reader, it excites me greatly when I come across a word that I have never read before. It is a rare occurrence, and I am surprised and pleased whenever it happens. I also appreciate when a writer uses words that are quite seldom used in literature, and it is safe to say that Patrick Rothfuss has these 2 points down to a fine art. He uses words like penultimate, canter, plinked, fulcrum, and widdershins. Words like unkilter, cipher, gooseprickle, intractable, and apetalous. He creates phrases and sentences that are unexpected and yet perfectly describe the situation so that it transports the reader right there with Ori. There are even words that I'm pretty sure he has made up himself and dotted about the text like Easter eggs in a video game. There are refrains that are recurring throughout the story that to some would seem unnecessarily repetitive. However, I think it adds to the whimsy of the story and the ethereal nature of the character. The most common are, "She washed her face and hands and feet," and "She knew exactly where she was." Both of these and many others, along with the lexicon and the wordsmithing talent of the writer, bring this story onto a level of writing that I, at least, had not experienced before in any book genre, let alone a fantasy one. I only wish I could be half the writer that Patrick Rothfuss is. Being fully immersed in a world that is such a brilliant, gifted writer has created is why, no matter how cool any Netflix series, big budget movie, or scintillating screenplay is, I will always remain a consummate bibliophile.